Welcome to another episode of Draw This. In this episode, we're going to be drawing a Monarch butterfly. So let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to be using Corel Painter 2016 today, and I'm starting with a canvas that is 11 by 14 inches at 300 dpi, and I've just gone ahead and toned it this kind of pale green olive color. I'm going to turn on Symmetry painting, or mirror painting mode, make sure that it's on with the on button, and then make sure not to accidentally move your guide left or right because you'll throw off your symmetry. I'm going to switch to my brush tool. I'm going to select the detail oils, and then I'm going to select a light gray color. I'm going to go ahead and create a new layer for my sketch. Just ignore these other layers for now. These are layers that I created ahead of time. And on that sketch layer, let's start sketching out our butterfly. So we know the head is kind of a oval shape like this. The eyes are kind of tall ovals. It's a place where the antennae attach. Now I have a reference photo that I'm using. You could get your own reference photo, or you could just draw from imagination. I'm going to be doing a monarch butterfly, but you could really do any kind of butterfly you want and choose your own colors. Some little ridges here on the body like this. And the wings attach kind of here and here. So we'll have the first set of wings that kind of go like an arching shape like this. I'll just try to estimate the general shape of them. They're kind of like a triangle shape. And then the bottom wing is kind of overlapped. And it goes down beyond the edge of the abdomen. The abdomen's the long part, the thorax is the center, and there's the head. The wings kind of overlap the abdomen a bit too. I'm going to switch to my eraser and just erase a little bit here to clean this up. Now if you find your butterfly spilling off the edge of the page, what you can do is you can go to your sketch layer and you can go to Edit Free Transform. I'm going to click my shortcut here. And then you want to hover over this corner till you get this icon that looks like a double-headed arrow. And then you want to start dragging. Now you'll notice that the symmetry is getting thrown off. If you hold Alt or Option, it'll lock it in the center. However, it'll still squish. So what you want to do is you want to hold Shift in addition to Alt, and you can scale it from the center while constraining the proportions. So I think something like that will work. Make sure you don't move your butterfly left or right. Let's go ahead and set the composite method for our sketch to multiply. And if you want, you can select the move tool and you can move your butterfly up or down if you need to center it. Let's go ahead and draw in the antennae, like so. We'll draw in the butterfly's spot shapes. So the edge here along the top, and then most of the bottom and the sides are all going to be pretty dark. We'll have 3 little spots here, 3 little semi-opaque spots here, and then a bunch of white spots all along the bottom edges. Along the bottom, we want to reserve a nice dark area here, and we want to make something that looks kind of like an M, like this, with kind of a rounded center. And underneath the M, we'll just make a little arch. Something like that will work. There's a couple little white spots that we'll put in on the head and on the neck and on the eyes. Just so we can see this better, I'm just going to darken it a bit. And I'll merge those 2 layers together by holding Shift, selecting the second, and then hitting Ctrl E, or I could go to Collapse Layers down in the Layers palette. I'll have to make sure I set my composite method back to multiply. And then next what we'll want to do is we'll want to start creating some layers beneath the sketch. We want to have 1 layer for each overlapping object, so the head, the body, the upper wing, the lower wing, the wing colors, the antennae, and so on. So I've gone ahead and created a whole bunch of layers and I've grouped them together. I have the wings upper grouped together, the wings lower grouped together, and then the body. And within each group I have a bunch of layers that are stacked from foreground to background. The foreground layers would be at the top of the layers palette. So the wings upper are above the wings lower are above the body, The eyes are above the head is above the body, and so on. So let's go ahead and start filling in some layers. I'm going to go to the wings upper layer, and I'm going to select a nice orangey color like this. This doesn't have to be my final color because I can change it later. Then I'm going to select the scratchboard tool. This is just a default brush that comes with Corel Painter. And I'm going to carefully paint in right along the edge with nice smooth strokes. Because if I make a nice closed shape, I can switch to my paint bucket and I can just fill in the center really quickly. Let's go to the wings lower layer. Let's pick a different color that we can see easily. And we'll put in that. We'll want to make sure that we go ahead and connect the edges of our shape here. Switch to the paint bucket and fill that in. Next, let's go to the body layer. Let's go ahead and fill that in. If you're planning on animating this or changing the shape of the wings, you may want to hide your wing layers while you draw your body, just to make sure that you make it the right shape and you don't overpaint. Let's go to the head layer. We'll pick a different color. Let's switch to the eyes layer. Let's put in the eyes. And we'll go to the antennae layer. Maybe helpful to rotate your canvas here. I'm going to go ahead and do that. And it's important to note that you can draw on either the left or the right side. Use the scratchboard tool with black. And draw in my antennae. I'm going to double click on the rotate tool to rotate it back. And go to the body lines layer, select white. I'm just going to indicate a couple little lines on the body. Go to the head spots layer. Let's add in those little spots. Now at this point, if you want to adjust anything, like let's say the wings upper, you can use the pinch, bulge, or distortion brushes to reshape your layer. I'm going to use the pinch brush. I'm going to paint along the edge. And you can see that I can sculpt it into a more refined shape if I want to. I'm going to go to the wings lower layer and I'm going to try the Distorto brush. I'm going to kind of push in the bottom to make them a little more rugged. Do that on the upper as well. And if you do it too much, you can always switch back to that pinch brush and just pinch it to clean it up again. Now we want to draw the patterns in the middle of the wings, so to do that, we're going to right-click on the wings upper layer, choose Select Layer Content. That puts a selection around those edges, that way we can't paint outside of that selection. I'm going to hide that selection while still keeping it active by clicking on Show Hide Selection. I'm going to go to the wings dark upper layer, I'm going to select black, and I'm going to select the scratchboard, and I'm going to go ahead and put that in. So very thin along the top edge, much thicker here along the bottom, a little bit up here on the side. And each butterfly has a very similar pattern to all the other butterflies, but they're also kind of unique. So keep that in mind, that you want to follow this similar pattern, but you can change it up a bit. And if you don't want to paint a monarch butterfly, you can choose your own colors. I want this to be a versatile tutorial. We'll put in the white spots separately, so don't worry about covering up those areas of your sketch. You can also switch to your eraser if you want to erase things and clean them up. Let's switch back to our brush. Let's go to the wings lower layer and let's just repeat that process. We'll get our selection by right-clicking and choosing Select Layer Content. We'll hide the selection. We can use Ctrl-Shift-H to hide it. We'll go to the wings dark lower layer. Use that same black color, same brush. Put in our little M shape here. And the bottom edge of this can be pretty dark. Just fill that in with a bigger brush. And I'm going to taper off the bottom a little bit so it kind of blends into the pattern. Let's go to our sketch layer. Let's change it from multiply to a screen composite method. That way we can see it over the dark areas here. May help to zoom in too so you can see what you're doing. Now we want to go to the wing spots layer, select white. We'll also want to deselect our active selection by choosing Select None. We can use that scratchboard to put in some little dashes along the edge here. And some little white spots. Little dashes here along this edge. Above that, we want some bigger spots. Put a few up here if you want to. Let's go ahead and do the spots on the bottom as well. I want to deselect that selection by choosing Select None. If you're not worried about painting outside of your wing shape, you don't necessarily have to make that selection. Do some dashes along the edge here. Smaller spots near the dashes, and then a few bigger spots above that. And these don't have to be perfectly symmetrical too. You can turn off your symmetry painting at any time. And then you could go in here and you could add in some asymmetry. You could select the eraser and you could shave a few of these down. Do that on the top of the wing as well. All right, so now we've got everything blocked in. We can go ahead and hide that sketch because we won't be using it anymore. And we can start coloring these layers some more appropriate finalized colors. Now would be a good time to go ahead and save, so I'm going to choose Save As. I'm going to save this as Butterfly, and each time I save, I'm going to give it a new number. So I'll have Butterfly 0, Butterfly 1, Butterfly 2, and so on. I'm going to save this as a PSD, but you could also save it as a RIF. So I've gone ahead and switched to the example that I was working on earlier. I spent a little bit more time on this one, so I didn't have to be so rushed to make sure that I got the shape the way that I wanted it to be. And so it's the same layers and everything else. I've gone ahead and chosen some colors. I chose kind of a dark bluish gray for most of my black colors. I chose a really dark, almost black for the eyes. The spots are white, and the orange is a nice bright orange color like this. I also erased a little bit of the body lines that I added just to make them a little more faint. What I did to change the color is I selected a layer, let's say the wings upper layer, and I turned on Preserve Transparency. So when it's blue, it's on, when it's black, it's off. While Preserve Transparency is on, you won't be able to paint outside of the shape that you've already created. So for instance, this orange area of this wing, if I wanted to either paint on that using a different color or just fill it with a different color, I could go to Fill. And there I've changed the color. If Preserve Transparency is not on, then you'll be able to add paint. And if I go to Fill, it just fills everything. That's not what we want. So make sure Preserve Transparency is on, choose the colors that you like, and then once you've done that, we can start shading this and making it look more three-dimensional. So the wings are pretty flat, but the head is kind of spherical and the body's kind of cylindrical. So we'll want to shade those appropriately. I'm going to zoom into those. I'm going to make sure that my mirror painting symmetry is on. I'm going to select the head layer. I'm going to use the Airbrush, and I'm going to hold Alt and sample the color that I chose here. I'm going to make it a little bit lighter. I'll turn on Preserve Transparency so I don't paint outside of my head shape. I'll just lighten the top edge and the bottom edge a bit. Make my color a little bit brighter. And that makes the head kind of stand out. I'm going to go to the eyes layer. Since we have an environment color, we can sample that. We can make that look like it's kind of spherical. Put a brighter spot right in the middle there. Maybe we'll even switch to an almost white and put in a little bit of that. We can even reflect some of the orange from the wings on the bottom edge of the eye. Let's go to the body layer and let's sample that base color. Let's make that a little bit brighter. We'll go ahead and go right down the center here. Make it a little bit lighter. A little bit of a brighter spot there in the center. If you overpaint too much, you can always switch back to your darker color by sampling it. You can put that back in. Kind of add some little divisions here where the body has these creases. Let's go to the antennae layer. I'm going to sample one of these lighter colors that I used on the head. And I'll just kind of detail the antennae a little bit. I'm going to zoom out. Let's do some work on the wings. I'm going to go to the wings dark up layer. I'm going to sample this color that I used for the dark color. I'm going to select the airbrush. I'm going to make that color a bit darker. I'm going to darken a few areas here. This will be pretty subtle, but it'll help the wings look less flat. We'll go to the wings dark lower layer, and I'll do the same for that. I especially want there to be a shadow where the two wings overlap each other. Let's go to the wings lower layer. That's the orange part of the wings. And let's select kind of a brighter orangey yellow color. Let's have it kind of fade from orange to that orangey yellow. Let's do that on the wings upper as well. Let's sample that base orange color. Let's make it a little bit darker. Maybe we'll even darken it right where the wings attach to the body, and then down on this area where the wings are maybe more translucent. And we'll sample this lighter orange. We'll put that right about there where the wings connect. Now, the black areas on the wings will reflect a little bit of the sky color, so it might be helpful to put in some blue if you want it to look a little more natural. Let's go ahead and right-click on the wings dark up layer. Let's choose Select Layer Content. Let's hide that selection with Ctrl-Shift-H. And let's use a bluish color with the Airbrush, just to put in a little bit of blue reflection here and there. It's going to be pretty subtle. Let's do that on the dark lower as well. I'm painting on this wings color low and wings color up layer. These are just blank layers. I'll put in a little bit of that. And I think that's a pretty good start so far. Let's continue adding detail to our piece. I'm going to go ahead and correct a few things because after spending a little bit of time looking at my reference photo, I started to see that some things weren't quite right. So I'm going to go ahead and fix those, and this will show you the power of working with layers. It may seem kind of silly to create all these layers and groups and all this stuff, but now if I want to fix something, it's very easy because I can just fix that one layer. For example, the antennae, I think I want to make those a little bit longer. So I'm just going to do a free transform and then drag them up. I'm going to make sure that mirror painting is turned on. And then I'm going to use my eraser to erase these a little bit near the ends. And then I'm going to use the scratchboard tool just to go ahead and clean that up and make it an even width. And maybe I'll select a slightly lighter color and I'll put a little highlight. I'm going to select the layer adjuster tool and I'm going to just kind of move those down just a little bit. I'm going to add a little bit here in the middle like this. Maybe add a little white spot to that. If this line is getting in your way and you want to still draw in symmetry but you don't want to see the line, what you can do is go back to the mirror painting tool and just click this eyeball to toggle the plane invisible. Now you can see what I'm doing here better. While we're working on the head, let's do a little bit of work to that. I'm going to select the head spots, the eyes, and the head, and I'm going to transform those. I'm going to hold Alt so that I'm transforming from the center. And I'm just going to squish this in a bit, maybe squish it down, because we actually want the edge of the eyes to line up with the side of the body here. So the head needs to be smaller overall. Again, I need to move my antennae down more. I'm going to draw in a bit more of this top area here on the head, because we want it to line up with these little protrusions on the side. So I might need to actually repaint my spot here. Let's move on down to the body layer. That needs a little bit of work. I'm going to select the body and the body lines, and I'm going to transform those with Ctrl-T. I'm going to scale up the bottom of the abdomen to where it meets up with the orange here on the wings. I'm going to click on the check to commit. I notice the edges are a little soft here on the sides and at the top, so I'm going to select the pinch brush. I'm going to use that to sharpen that up. Maybe we'll have this come down to almost a point as well. Clean it up here as well. While we're pinching things together, let's do a little bit of work on the wings. Let's go to the wings lower dark. Let's pinch that a little bit just to make it a sharper angle. Let's go over to the edge of this wing here. Let's go to wings dark up. We can round that off a little bit. Now this M shape here isn't exactly where I want it, so I want to adjust that a little bit. I'm going to select my eraser, and I'm just going to erase that area, and I'm going to repaint it. Now some of it won't erase because that particular spot is on the wings color low layer, so I'll need to erase that as well. And just so I get it right this time, I'm going to spend a little more time planning this with a sketch. So we actually want this to be a little more centered. So the arch would be right about here, and then you'd have the other side of the M going up here. Something like that. We'll go ahead and reduce the opacity of that temporary sketch. I'm going to go back to the wings dark lower. I'm going to select the scratch board. I'm going to sample this dark color that we're using for the wings. And let's just repaint that in. And there we go, that's looking a lot better. Let's go ahead and right-click on the wings dark lower layer and choose Select Layer Content to put a selection around it. We'll hide the selection with Ctrl-Shift-H. We can delete that temporary sketch, and let's go to the wings color low layer. Let's switch to the airbrush and let's add in a little bit of blue like we did earlier. Let's go ahead and select none to deselect that selection. Let's go to the wings dark lower. Let's turn preserve transparency on and let's select a darker color, and we'll add in a couple little dark spots too so that this all blends together. I'm going to go to the wings low group and I'm going to create a layer at the top of that group. I'm going to call this joints low. I don't know what the anatomical name for this part is, but this is basically going to be where the wings connect to the body. There's kind of a grayish area here, so I'll fill that in. We want to do the same for the top wing. Now let's clean up some of the shapes on the wings. I'm going to go to wings dark up. I'm going to select the pinch brush and maybe the distort. I'm just going to kind of pull this into a different shape to round off the end here. I'm going to adjust this corner here and just kind of smooth this out a bit. That's looking better. I'm going to zoom out and evaluate how the piece is coming along so far. I'm going to zoom back in. Let's go to those joints layers that we created earlier. Let's turn on preserve transparency and let's use the airbrush to darken those a little bit. I'm going to darken them where they're kind of overlapped by the body. Let's go to the joints up layer. Let's do those as well. And now we can start kind of merging some layers together so that they're easier to work with. So let's do a save as to save a copy of our artwork. I'm going to save this as butterfly 2. I'm going to select the wings up group and I'm going to hit Ctrl E to merge it. You could also do that from down here in collapse layers in the layers menu. I'm also going to merge the wings low. Let's go to the wings up layer and let's do a little bit of blending here. I'm going to select the coarse oily blender. And I'm just going to blend the edges on some of these shapes. This will make it look a little more natural. You want to follow the direction or the grain of the wing, which is kind of flowing like this. So you want your smudges to be kind of going in that direction more or less. Just tap with this brush. That'll just kind of make the edge a little more jagged. Let's go on down to the wings low layer and let's do that there as well. Let's go back to the wings up layer. There's a couple spots that I missed that I want to clean up. I'm going to zoom out a bit and see how we're looking. Let's go ahead and group the wings up and the wings lower layers together. Let's select that wings group and let's choose select group content. That'll put a selection around all the layers in that group. I'm going to toggle open the wings group and I'm going to create a layer at the top. And I'm going to call this speckles because butterflies and moths have kind of speckly, dusty wings. I'm going to hide that selection so it's not visible. And I'm going to select the pixel brush. And I'm going to select kind of a light gray color like this. And I'm just going to paint over the whole thing. Now while you're zoomed out, you really won't be able to see this, but when you zoom in, it'll be more apparent. So if I zoom in, you can see all those little speckles. That gives it a nice speckly texture. Let's also use the pepper spray brush. I'm going to set the feature to 2, and I'm just going to click with my mouse because if I use my pen, sometimes it does a little too much. So I'll just click all over the wings, increase my feature to 4. That'll increase the size of the little pixels that I spray on here. And I'll set my feature to 6, and I'll click a few more of those as well. So now if I zoom in, you can see that nice speckly pattern there. It's a bit too strong, so what I want to do is maybe change it to overlay. And now if I zoom in, you can see that it adds speckles, but they're a little more subtle because they blend better. Let's add another layer. We'll call this speckles dark. Let's set the composite method to multiply. I'm going to use that same brush, and I'm going to sample one of these darker orange colors. Let's just spray in a little bit of dark area here on the wings. Maybe I'll make it a bit darker, more of a darker brown here. I'm going to do that on the lower wings as well, kind of in between the lines here, a little M shape. Let's add one more layer of speckles. These will be some lighter speckles. Let's make these kind of a pale yellow color like this. We'll just add a few of these here and there. Now if these are a little too strong for your liking, you can always reduce the opacity of the layer to dim it down a little bit. Let's go to the wings up layer and let's tweak the edges of those a little bit. I'm going to deselect my active selection by choosing select none. I'm going to select the pinch brush and I'm just going to reshape this a bit. Might make the edge a little bit sharper there on the bottom and straighten out that edge a bit. Let's select the airbrush. Let's turn on preserve transparency. Let's select kind of a light brownish gray color like this. And let's zoom into the edge of the wing. Let's go ahead and add a little bit of highlight along the edge of the wing there, just to make it kind of pop out so it doesn't look flat. Maybe we'll switch to the scratch board and we'll add a little bit of white along the edge too right there. We'll want to do the same with the wing low, so I'll go back to the airbrush, select that light gray color, just go right along the edge, because even though the wing looks flat, if you were to look at it really close, it would have kind of an edge to it. Let's go to the wings up layer. Let's create a layer above that. I'm going to call this ridges. I'm not really sure what to call this layer either. But basically what we want to do here is we want to draw the little grooves in the wings. So for example, there would be one kind of flowing down the center of this. Maybe along here. Maybe kind of along the top like this. And then in between a lot of these white spots. Same goes for the lower wing. Let's select a darker color. We want to go right alongside that with the darker color on both sides so that it looks like it's kind of sticking out. For the lighter part of the wings, you can use a lighter color. And let's zoom out and see how we're looking. And that might be a bit too strong, so let's do a couple things. Let's set the composite method to overlay, and let's reduce the opacity a little bit. We want that to be pretty subtle. And these monarch butterflies have a little bit of fuzziness towards the bottom edge of their thorax, so I'm going to add that in. I'm going to go to the wings layer. I'm going to create a layer above that. I'm going to call it fuzz. And then I'm going to sample this dark gray color I used on the body, make that a little bit darker. I'm going to select the detail oils. And I'm going to put in some fuzziness. Make my brush a little bit bigger. Just draw little individual hairs here. Let's lighten our color a little bit. We'll add in a few lighter ones. Make it even lighter. And just work back and forth between light and dark until you get the result that you want. Let's go to the body lines layer. I'm going to select one of these lighter white colors. And let's add in a little bit of light here on the abdomen. Maybe we'll kind of enhance these a little bit too by adding a few more little spots to them. We'll have one more little segment here. We'll zoom out a little bit. Let's go to the head spots layer. Let's go ahead and enhance those a little bit because they should be a bit bigger on the head here. The ones on the eyes can be a bit bigger as well. And the ones on the shoulders. And now we can go ahead and merge the body layers together, but before we do that, let's just save a copy. And with that body group selected, I'm going to hit Ctrl E to merge those layers. I'm going to right click on the body layer and choose Select Layer Content. Hide the selection with Ctrl Shift H. I'm going to create a new layer. I'm going to call it Body SH. SH is short for shadow, so that'll be some shading on the body. I'm going to select a darker color, and I'm going to change the composite method to multiply. And I'm just going to darken the head a little bit using the Airbrush. I can switch to the eraser, and anywhere where I overpaint, I can just erase that area. Mainly I'm just erasing over the highlights. I'm going to switch to the body layer, and I think the antennae are a bit too thick on their stalks, so I'm going to select the pinch brush. I'm just going to pinch those together a little bit, thin them out. Let's go ahead and do a save as and save another copy of our work. Let's go to the wings low layer. Let's right click on it and let's choose duplicate layer. Let's move that duplicate down below the body. Then we'll use the layer adjuster to move it up and to the left a little bit. We're creating a little bit of extra wing here. Let's go ahead and select the lasso selection tool. Let's make a selection around that area. Let's go to select, invert selection, and then we'll just hit delete, or we'll go to edit, clear, to clear everything outside that selection. So basically what we've done here is we've just added a little bit of wing here because there's some wings on the underside as well. I'm going to hit Ctrl T to free transform, and I'm going to kind of squish it down a little bit so that we can see some of that orange there. And I'm going to switch to the Distorto brush, and I'm just going to distort the edge so it's not exactly the same as the edge that we copied it from. I'm going to rename this Wing BG for Wing Background. I'm going to go ahead and play with the edges of these wings a little bit, but I want to go ahead and turn off Symmetry. So I'm going to go to the mirror painting tool and turn it off. Then I'm going to go to the Distorto brush. I'm going to go to the wings up layer. And I'm just going to kind of dent in the bottom edges of these wings. We'll go to the wings low layer. We'll do that to that layer also. And we'll go to the wing background and we'll dent the edge of that as well. Now I think the head is looking a little too round, so I'm going to go ahead and select the body shadow on the body and merge those with Ctrl E. And then on that merged body layer, I'm going to make a selection of just the head and the antennae. And I'm going to hit Ctrl T. I'm going to squish that down a little bit so the head is flatter. I'm going to hit Ctrl D to deselect. Let's go ahead and save as again, save another copy. And this time let's go ahead and merge all of our layers except for the background. And let's select the coarse oily blender. Let's blend this transition here where the wing connects to the body on both sides. Let's blend this fuzzy area a little bit. And maybe let's add a new layer and let's add a little more fuzz. It's not showing up quite like I want it to. And again, I have symmetry turned off, so it's going to be asymmetrical here. Use my dark color and put in some of that as well. Add in a few little light spots here and there where the wings connect to the body, just so it's not perfectly symmetrical everywhere. Try to add a little asymmetry wherever I can to change it up. Let's go back to the butterfly layer. Let's select the Speckle Diffuse Blur Blender. Let's zoom in. Let's use that along some of the edges just to kind of blend it up. It blends while making it kind of speckly. I'm just painting right along the edges. I'm making sure that I don't destroy anything. I want to avoid this nice sharp area where the two wings are separated because that's not part of the pattern, that's just the wings overlapping each other. Do that on the other side as well. And we'll zoom out and see how we're looking. It's too easy to look at this really close and see too much detail because in real life butterflies are pretty small, so you don't need to look at it too big. As long as it looks good small, you're on the right track. I'm going to go ahead and merge these two butterfly layers together. Might transform it a bit, make it a bit taller. Scale it down just a bit so that it fits on the canvas better. I might move it up so that it's more centered. I think again the head is a bit too round. Since I transformed it, that kind of messed it up. So what I'll need to do here is I'll need to select it. So I'm going to use two selections here. I'm going to make one selection around the antennae, and I'm going to hold Shift. I'm going to start my other selection down here so that I get just this head area. I'm going to transform that, squish it down so it's more flat, and then deselect. That's looking better. Let's add one more layer. Let's select the detail oils, and we can put in some dark little line here to separate these two wing parts. Maybe we'll select a lighter yellow orange, and in a couple places we'll emphasize the edge of the wings. We use that lighter gray here to separate these two wings from each other a little bit. And on the other side, we use a darker color as well to create kind of a shadow in between. I'm going to create another new layer. I'm going to use a kind of light yellow color to put in a few little streaks and strokes here. I'm going to set the composite method for that to screen. I'm just putting more emphasis on those little ridges that I added earlier. I'm going to add another new layer. I'm going to set the composite method to multiply. Select kind of a dark blue in the airbrush. Let's just kind of darken this little fuzzy area a little bit here. It doesn't need to be so bright. I'm going to zoom out and see how we're looking. It's starting to look like a pretty decent butterfly. I'm going to go to that layer 3. Those are those little ridges that I made. And I'm going to reduce the opacity just a bit so that's a little more subtle. Let's go ahead and save as again. Save another copy. And I'm going to merge my butterfly layers again. I'm going to select the rectangular selection tool, select the bottom edges of the wings here, transform those a little bit just to kind of flatten them off. Let's go ahead and turn on Symmetry again, and let's create a new layer with some guides. Let's just draw a vertical guide over here. Maybe I want to extend the wings a little bit. So I'm going to extend them from these points here. Now, because when we're transforming, we can't transform with symmetry, we have to make these guides so that we know exactly where we're going to extend the wings on both sides. So back to the butterfly layer, select from this guide all the way over to the other guide, transform with Ctrl T, and then stretch your wing out, maybe to about there. Now I'll need to adjust my guides, so I'm going to erase this guide. Now I'm going to draw in one here. I'm using Shift to make a vertical line. Go back to the butterfly layer, select the rectangular selection tool, select up to this guide here, transform, pull that out. And there we go. We have an even transformation, and we can delete those guides. Now, if you zoom in a little bit, you might see that if you transformed, it may have created a little bit of a line here. That's a pretty easy fix. We'll just create a new layer beneath the butterfly, and we'll select the scratch board, and we'll just sample a color that's nearby. And we'll just paint right on top of that using colors that are in the immediate region there. And then merge those two layers together with Ctrl E, and then use the diffuse blur if you need to, anywhere where you need to kind of soften that line that might still be there. Might help to zoom in and look for it. I think I got most of it. Something like that probably won't show up when you're really far zoomed out anyway, so it's not anything that you need to worry about too much. I'm going to use the detail oils. I add a little bit of a dark line up here on the edge of the shoulder. Maybe add a little light spot there as well. I'm going to zoom back out. Might add a couple little light gray spots here where the wings connect. And then I think we can go ahead and turn off symmetry painting and we can start wrapping this up. I'm going to go ahead and save as to save another copy. Don't worry if you have a lot of copies, because if you don't end up going back and using any of these old ones, you can always delete them later. Now it's up to you if you want to put in a background. I'm not going to put in a background. I'm going to leave it kind of solid like this because I like that effect. But one last thing we can do to help this look a little more realistic is we can add a little bit of focal blurring. So let's go ahead and just drop all our layers if we don't need to work on the background anymore. And then I'm going to go to Select All. And then I'm going to copy and paste. Now I have that duplicate. And on that duplicate layer, I'm going to go to Effects, Focus, Soften. And I'm going to soften it quite a bit, let's say 20. And I'm going to create a mask on that layer. I'm going to select black, select the airbrush, make a big airbrush. Then I can bring the focus back in towards the center here. So what this is doing is kind of blurring out the edges a little bit and helping it look a little more natural. Let's go ahead and drop all layers to merge all those layers together. You can also use the blur blender to paint along the edges to kind of soften them if they're too sharp. And let's add a little bit of flavor to this piece. Let's create a new layer. Let's set the composite method to overlay. Let's select kind of a bright yellow color and let's fill the canvas with that color. Let's add a mask to that layer. Let's select black and let's fill the mask with black. Then we'll switch to white. We'll select the airbrush. And in a few places here, we can kind of pop out some yellows in the wings. Let's create another layer for another overlay. And you can experiment with different colors here. I'm going to try maybe this blue color. I'm going to fill the canvas with that. And I'm going to create a mask. I'm going to fill that mask with black. I'll select white again. And anywhere where I want to add a little bit of blue, I'll just kind of paint there to bring that blue in. You can reduce the opacity of that layer too to make it a little more subtle. I'm going to go ahead and drop all my layers again. I'm going to create a new layer. I'm going to set the composite method to lighten. I'm going to select dark blue color and I'm going to fill the canvas with that color. And if I hunt around, you can see what lighten is doing. It's turning my darkest colors into any particular color that I select. So what I want to do here is I just want to make this so that my darkest color is kind of a dark blue and not absolute black. If we do a before and after, you can see what it's doing. I just want to reduce that a little bit so it's just a subtle effect. Something like that looks pretty good, just so you can barely notice it. I'm going to go ahead and drop all my layers again. I'm going to choose Save As, save a copy, and then I'll zoom out. And we have a finished butterfly. So I hope you enjoyed this episode of Draw This. If you did, take a quick second to like this video. And if you're new to my channel, make sure to subscribe to get access to all of my free digital art tutorials. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.